Something loosens in the chest. The moment good news arrives, and then, almost immediately, tightens again. Not from doubt that the news is real, from something harder to name. A quiet wrongness, like a note played slightly off-key, that only you can hear. You got the job. The relationship is actually going well. The creative project landed exactly where you hoped it would. And somewhere underneath the relief, there's a low hum of discomfort that doesn't match the moment. You find yourself waiting, not celebrating. Waiting for the thing that corrects it. This isn't pessimism exactly. Pessimists at least have a consistent logic. This is stranger. You want good things. You pursue them. And when they arrive, some part of you resists receiving them. Not loudly. Just enough to take the edge off every win, before you've had a chance to feel it. And if someone asks how you're doing, you'll probably say fine, instead of good, because good feels like a claim. You're not sure you're allowed to make. Most people brush past this, call it superstition, call it modesty, move on. But if you stay with it, if you actually sit with that tightening in the chest rather than immediately redirecting it, you start to notice. It isn't random. There's a shape to it, a logic. And it belongs to you specifically, not just to anxious people in general. The surface behavior is familiar. You downplay the news when you share it. You attach qualifiers before anyone else can. It went well, but I got lucky. The timing was right, honestly. Anyone in my position probably would have gotten it. You're preemptively shrinking the thing before someone else does it for you. And it feels like humility. It presents as humility, but underneath, it's doing something else entirely. What's actually happening is closer to threat management. The mind treats visible success as exposure, and exposure, somewhere deep in the wiring, reads as danger. Not the rational kind, the old kind, the kind that doesn't care whether it's 2024 or 40,000 years ago. The kind that learned, at some point, that standing out has costs. That being seen as doing better than those around you creates tension, invites scrutiny, risks the loss of something more important than the gain itself. Psychologists have studied this pattern in ways that are quietly unsettling. People who struggle to receive positive outcomes without anxiety tend to have something in common. Their self-concept, the internal story about who they are and what they deserve, is built partly around difficulty, around effort and struggle and overcoming. Success without sufficient suffering doesn't fit the architecture. So the mind scrambles to reframe it, minimizes it, attaches it to luck instead of capacity, finds a way to make the good things smaller, so it fits back inside the story of a person who doesn't quite land there yet. And here's where it gets strange. The guilt isn't always about the thing itself. Sometimes it's relational. If I succeed, someone else doesn't. If I'm happy, what does that say about the people around me who aren't? This runs especially deep in families where love was tied to shared suffering, where struggling together was the binding agent, where being fine, actually fine, felt like a kind of departure, a betrayal, wrapped in good news. If everyone else is still in the hard chapter, stepping into something easier feels disloyal. In a way you can't quite justify, but can't quite shake either. So you learn to self-handicap. Not as a decision, not as something you planned, but you do it. You create just enough friction to stay within the zone of acceptable success. You miss the deadline slightly. You undersell yourself right at the moment it matters. You introduce doubt into rooms where you have every right to take up space confidently. And it works. In a perverse way, it keeps you legible to the version of yourself that was built inside a system that rewarded struggle more than arrival. The identity-level piece is the part that rarely gets said out loud. For some people, suffering is not just something that happened to them, it became them. The person who is in the middle of something hard is interesting, relatable, rootable. The person who simply has good things, who isn't currently working through a difficult chapter, that person is harder to locate inside the self. You start to wonder who you are when things are going right, and the answer is blurry, in a way that unsettles you more than any actual problem would. There's real research behind this. People with a less stable sense of who they are tend to find sustained positive emotion destabilizing rather than reinforcing. Not because they're broken, because their identity was built for movement, for challenge, for the ongoing state of becoming. Arrival has no story, and humans, more than almost anything, need a story they can live inside and locate themselves within. The guilt, then, is a kind of loyalty to the self that had to fight, to the people who couldn't get there, to the version of your life where the narrative was still unresolved and still had something to prove. Letting yourself actually feel good, staying in it without immediately shrinking it or bracing against it, would mean letting that older self recede a little. And that's not as simple as deciding to. That self was real. That self survived things that mattered. You don't just release it because the circumstances shifted. What's hard to resolve is this: the discomfort isn't irrational. It evolved for reasons. It protected something real. And the people who feel it most intensely are often the ones with the sharpest awareness of how quickly things can change, how arbitrary outcomes often are. How much of success is context and timing, and not just effort? That awareness isn't a flaw. It keeps you honest. It keeps you from mistaking luck for character. But it can also become a tax that gets paid on every good thing, before you've even had a chance to decide whether you want to enjoy it. That word, deserve, is probably the one worth sitting with. Because somewhere in the process of becoming the person you are, deserving became something you prove through difficulty, rather than something that can simply be. And it might be worth noticing how much of your daily life is still organized around that original equation, even now. When the circumstances that created it are long gone, if you want to keep examining the patterns that move quietly underneath the surface of how you think and feel, the channel is here for that. Subscribe. If you'd rather understand what's actually running underneath the discomfort than just find cleaner ways to manage it from the outside,